Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world of marble courtyards, clinking cups, and a god who never quite knew how to hold his drink. Our subject is Dionysus, the ever-mischievous deity of wine, theater, and the occasional regrettable toga dance. But instead of focusing on the glamorous festivals or dramatic tragedies, you're about to cradle a much stranger artifact in your hands. A cup so awkward, so poorly designed, that you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes at a Greek dinner without spilling all over your tunic. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love for you to drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto the warm stone floor of an Athenian workshop. Around you, potters are hunched over spinning wheels, shaping clay with hands that are dusty and cracked. The air smells faintly of baked earth and olive oil, because almost everything in ancient Greece either smelled like that or like goat. On one table sits a curious drinking vessel, shallow and wide, with 2 handles stretching out like delicate ears. It's called a kylix, and at first glance you think, oh, that looks manageable. But then you pick it up, and immediately realize it's more of a liquid catastrophe waiting to happen. The bowl is so shallow that even the smallest tremor sends wine lapping over the rim. Imagine sipping from something as wide as a pie dish but as fragile as an eggshell. You tilt, you spill, you hold it steady, and it still somehow leaks onto your robe. Archaeologists have confirmed these cups were the standard issue for Greek symposia. Formal dinner parties where men reclined on couches and tried very hard to look wise while slowly turning into sloppy messes. Now, here's your mainstream historical fact for the evening. The kylix wasn't just a cup, it was a canvas. The inside often bore painted scenes, sometimes of mythological figures, sometimes of cheeky jokes, like a figure of Dionysus riding a dolphin that only revealed itself once you drained the wine. Yes, your drink literally came with a surprise illustration at the bottom centuries before novelty mugs. And the quirky tidbit? Some kylix were designed with intentionally tilted bases. That meant if you weren't careful setting it down, the thing would roll like a toddler's toy and send wine splattering everywhere. It was almost as if the potters conspired with Dionysus himself to ensure sobriety remained optional. Historians still argue whether the impractical design was a flaw or a feature. Was the awkwardness meant to test your self-control, forcing you to sip slowly instead of gulping? Or was it a built-in party trick, a way to guarantee giggles when your philosopher friend spilled Merlot down his toga? Either way, you can picture yourself in that workshop, running your thumb along the smooth clay and wondering if anyone, even a god, could take this cup seriously. The kiln crackles in the corner, glowing orange, and you watch another potter etch a vine pattern into wet clay. The motif is unmistakable. Curling tendrils of grapes, nodding toward Dionysus. The craftsmen weren't shy about stamping his influence on their work. If you're the god of wine, after all, your face belongs on every barware set. You imagine the first symposium where this awkward cup was unveiled. Guests recline on low couches, servants pour diluted wine. It's always diluted, because pure wine was considered barbaric, and the host proudly presents these shallow, ear-handled saucers. A hush falls. Then the first guest takes a sip, tips the cup, and promptly dribbles red wine onto his beard. Cue laughter. Somewhere in the shadows, you can almost hear Dionysus chuckling. One scholar once called the kylix the social equalizer of antiquity, because no matter how clever, wealthy, or poised you were, eventually you'd fumble the thing. That's the charm of it. Even Socrates might have looked ridiculous, carefully balancing his saucer of wine like a nervous waiter. And maybe that was the point. In a culture obsessed with competition, athletics, politics, philosophy, the symposium was one arena where everyone spilled equally. You glance again at the kylix on the table. The clay is warm from the kiln, the paint still glistening. It's a vessel that makes no sense, and yet it somehow fits perfectly into the world of Dionysus. A god who thrived in the tension between order and chaos, between polished marble and sloshed tunics. Holding it, you sense that you're not just grasping a cup. You're holding the very essence of Dionysian humor, a reminder that sometimes the most divine experiences arrive wrapped in a mess. And so, as you settle deeper into your couch, you let the awkwardness of the kylix wash over you, like wine that can never quite stay inside its own cup. The kylix rests in your hands now, awkward as ever, but tonight it's not just a quirky piece of pottery. It's a symbol claimed by Dionysus himself, the god who saw beauty in imbalance and joy in things that refused to behave. You watch as the scene around you shifts. Stone floors dissolve into ivy-draped groves where Dionysus walks barefoot, vines curling at his heels, and that strange shallow cup dangling casually from his fingers. He looks younger than you expect, with a soft smile and hair tumbling in loose curls, but don't let the gentle features fool you. This is a god who can unravel a city with a festival, who can drive mortals into ecstatic frenzies with one gulp of wine. And yet, he chooses this wobbly saucer to sip from, as if mocking the idea that drinking should ever be dignified. Here's your mainstream historical fact for this section. Dionysus was often depicted on kylix themselves, lounging across the inner circle of the cup. One famous example shows him sailing across a sea in a tiny boat, vines sprouting miraculously from the mast. The moment you drained your wine, there he was, Dionysus revealed at the bottom, like the punchline of an ancient joke. You didn't just drink with the god. You drank into him, staring at his image through the dregs of your cup. And the quirky tidbit? Some kylix came with hidden faces that seemed to peek over the rim. When you raised the cup to drink, suddenly you weren't just sipping, you were wearing a mask. To your fellow guests, you looked like a goggle-eyed satyr or a mischievous Dionysus himself. Imagine the quiet amusement of trying to hold a serious philosophical debate while your neighbor appeared to transform into a mythological creature every time he took a sip. It's like the ancient Greek version of novelty sunglasses at a party, pointless, ridiculous, and yet completely irresistible. Historians still argue whether Dionysus' embrace of such designs was meant as satire or sacred symbolism. Was the god encouraging mortals to laugh at their own fragility, reminding them that dignity is as shallow as a kylix? Or did the vessel hold ritual weight, a gateway to altered states where the line between human and divine blurred? The truth is, with Dionysus, it's never clear where the prank ends and the sermon begins. You picture him now, reclining at a symposium, half-smile playing across his lips. A guest across the room tilts the cup and spills wine down his beard, and Dionysus doesn't scold, he beams. Because every drip and dribble is a tiny offering to him, a sign that order is slipping and joy is taking its place. For Dionysus, the awkward cup is perfect precisely because it refuses to be mastered. As the night stretches, you can almost hear him whisper, "Control is overrated." He offers you the kylix, his fingers brushing yours, and you feel how absurdly fragile the clay is. He doesn't hand you a sturdy goblet or a practical mug, but this. The message is clear. Let go, stumble a little, laugh at the mess. And in this, the god of wine shows his real power, not in commanding thunderbolts or leading armies, but in teaching mortals to accept imbalance. Life tilts, like the base of the cup. Joy spills out, staining your robe, and somehow, that imperfection becomes divine. A soft breeze stirs the vines around you. The moonlight glints off the surface of the shallow wine, threatening to overflow. You realize that Dionysus has chosen the awkward cup because it mirrors life itself. Precarious, silly, and far too beautiful to keep contained. You sip carefully now, feeling the warm liquid touch your lips, and for a fleeting second, you almost believe you've understood the god's lesson. But then the cup tips, a single drop slides down your chin, and Dionysus laughs softly in the shadows. The cup tilts again, and this time you are no longer in a moonlit grove with vines curling underfoot. You're sprawled on a couch in a smoky Greek dining hall, the heart of a symposium. The air is thick with roasted lamb, burning oil lamps, and the unmistakable perfume of fermented grapes that someone definitely forgot to dilute properly. Reclining beside you are philosophers, poets, and men who claim to be both, all clutching those shallow kylix like awkward saucers balanced in nervous fingers. A servant glides by with another jug of wine, and you quickly realize the night is less about drinking responsibly and more about surviving with your dignity intact. The kylix, wide and unstable, becomes a mischievous test of coordination. One philosopher, let's call him Aristotle's drunk cousin, takes too enthusiastic a sip and promptly dribbles half of his drink onto the mosaic floor. The crowd chuckles, but no one scolds. Here, clumsy spillage is just part of the entertainment, a liquid punctuation mark in the night's long conversation. Now, your mainstream historical fact. The symposium wasn't just casual drinking. These gatherings were formalized events where citizens debated politics, shared poetry, and played structured drinking games called katabos. Players would fling dregs of wine at a target, often a small dish balanced on a stand, and points were scored depending on the splash. Imagine darts, but messier, and with significantly more laundry issues. The awkward kylix, shallow and perfectly primed for sloshing, was practically designed for this nonsense. And the quirky tidbit? Some symposia featured a symposiarch, basically the party manager, who decided how watered down the wine would be. Too weak, and everyone groaned. Too strong, and within 20 minutes philosophers were slurring their theories on the meaning of life. You can almost hear one of them insisting that shadows on cave walls are profound while simultaneously dripping Cabernet onto his tunic. Historians still argue whether the spill-prone design of the kylix was intentional training for these games or simply a cruel joke from the potters. Was the awkwardness a way of ensuring even great thinkers couldn't take themselves too seriously? Or was it just ergonomically disastrous claywork? Either way, the effect is the same. No one here leaves unstained. You lean back into your couch, the laughter around you rising. The man across from you tries to quote Homer but interrupts himself with a startled gasp as his cup betrays him, splashing wine down his chest. Dionysus himself seems present, invisible but palpable, hovering in the growing blur of chatter and clinking. Every spill feels like his subtle signature, his wink in the corner of your eye. There's a playful cruelty to it all. The symposium is supposed to be about control, measured drinking, witty conversation, orderly games, but the kylix ensures control is impossible. Each guest becomes equal in clumsiness. Even the most serious philosopher eventually looks like a toddler with soup. And oddly enough, that balance through chaos seems to keep the night gentle. Instead of rivalries boiling over, the constant dripping and slipping turn pride into laughter. You notice, too, that beneath the jokes lies ritual. Wine is not just refreshment. It's communion with Dionysus. Each drop spilled is a tiny libation, a miniature sacrifice. The awkward cup doesn't just trip you up. It redirects your dignity into devotion, one stain at a time. A chorus begins in the background, soft singing weaving with the flicker of lamps. The kylix in your hands trembles slightly as you lift it, and you see reflected in the wine not just your own face but a painted image inside. Dionysus reclining, watching you. He grins as if to say, "You'll never master this, and that's the point." The night stretches, conversation drifts from politics to poetry to someone's embarrassing goat story, and you realize how strange and lovely this all is. A society that managed to turn spilling your drink into a cultural glue. In a world where citizens argued endlessly in the agora, here they learned to laugh together over clumsy cups. The kylix, awkward and shallow, is less an accident of pottery and more a reminder of human fragility. And in that fragility, under the amused gaze of Dionysus, you begin to see the hidden charm. The symposium's laughter softens, the lamps gutter lower, and the awkward cup in your hand begins to feel heavier. Not just with wine, but with meaning. You blink, and the hall around you dissolves into shadowy groves again. Ivy creeping across your ankles, drums thudding faintly in the distance. This time, it isn't a dinner party. It's a ritual. You watch a procession of figures moving through the night, faces half hidden by animal masks, their hands carrying kylix that gleam in the firelight. These aren't just party favors anymore. In the cool hush of the forest, each shallow cup becomes an offering plate, a fragile gateway into something more than casual drinking. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The cult of Dionysus often used wine as a sacred medium in their ceremonies. Drinking wasn't just about pleasure. It was believed to dissolve the barrier between human and divine, letting mortals touch the edge of ecstasy. The kylix, with its impractical design, seemed perfectly suited for this purpose. Wine was meant to spill, to soak the earth, to feed the soil where vines would grow again. It was a cycle of offering, disguised as a party accident. And the quirky tidbit? Some kylix were painted with deliberately humorous or even risque images, the kind that would make a modern museum guide clear their throat awkwardly. Imagine discovering, at the bottom of your drink, a satyr doing something, let's just say, questionably acrobatic. It wasn't just crude humor. It was a reminder that Dionysus delighted in blurring lines. Sacred and silly, divine and indecent. You'd raise your cup for a solemn toast and, surprise, end up face to face with a painted butt. Historians still argue whether these images were merely comic relief or whether they carried deeper significance, reinforcing the idea that order and propriety crumble in Dionysian space. Maybe both are true. The cult thrived on contradictions. Solemn rituals punctuated by laughter, sacred libations poured from cups that practically guaranteed a mess. You watch now as the masked dancers swirl, their kylix flashing in the firelight. Some sip carefully, others tip wine onto the ground, deliberately, rhythmically. The smell of crushed grapes thickens, mixing with the earthy tang of soil. Each spill is not a mistake. It's a libation, an intentional gesture of devotion. What looked like clumsiness at the symposium is here transformed into ritual power. Your cup trembles again in your hands. You tilt it, letting a few drops fall into the moss. For a moment, you wonder if this is what Dionysus wanted all along. Not polished perfection, but surrender. To stop guarding the cup so tightly. To let the liquid run where it wants. And in this space, you see how the awkward kylix becomes more than pottery. It becomes philosophy. It embodies Dionysus' central truth. Life resists control. Grapes ferment. Laughter interrupts speeches. Vines split stone. You can build temples and laws, but chaos seeps in like spilled wine across marble. The cup, impractical and stubborn, insists you acknowledge it. A drumbeat grows louder. Torches flare. The dancers press closer, their voices lifting in strange songs. You catch glimpses of their painted kylix, images flickering in the firelight. Dionysus reclining on dolphins, satyrs laughing, women crowned with ivy. Each vessel is both a joke and a prayer. And somewhere in the chaos, you realize Dionysus himself doesn't prefer the awkward cup because it is elegant or sturdy or even beautiful. He prefers it because it sabotages the illusion of control. You cannot hold this cup without spilling. You cannot attend his ritual without loosening your grip. It is a design that humbles, equalizes, and, ultimately, unites. You lift your own kylix again, watching the liquid tremble on its edge. Somewhere in that precarious surface, you sense the god's smile. He is reminding you joy isn't neat, reverence isn't tidy, and worship, in his world, often looks like wine on your sandals and laughter in the middle of the night. The grove grows darker now, shadows lengthening, the last torch flickering as the ritual fades. You're left with nothing but the sound of dripping wine, rhythmic and steady, as if echoing the heartbeat of the god himself. The last of the torches burn down to embers, and the grove melts away into something strangely familiar. You blink, and you're back in a world of marble and mosaics. But then the floor cracks, centuries peel away, and suddenly you're drifting through time. The kylix doesn't vanish. It travels with you, clumsy as ever, as though Dionysus insists it remain in your hands no matter the century. You find yourself at a Roman banquet first, reclining beside senators who've swapped the Greek kylix for sturdier goblets. Yet, tucked away on a side table, you spot the old saucer cup, dusty but present, a mischievous survivor. A young Roman picks it up, laughs at its awkwardness, and immediately spills on his toga. Some things never change. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Romans adopted many Greek customs, including wine culture, but they generally preferred more practical drinking vessels. Still, archaeologists have uncovered kylix in Roman sites, suggesting the cup lingered, less as everyday wear, more as a nod to tradition, or perhaps as a party dare. The quirky tidbit? In some Renaissance collections, kylix were displayed not as drinking tools but as conversation pieces. Wealthy collectors liked to show off how refined they were by owning this bizarre relic of antiquity, even if they'd never dream of actually drinking from it. Imagine proudly unveiling your ancient saucer of spillage to dinner guests and watching them nod politely while secretly wondering if you've lost your mind. Historians still argue whether the kylix's survival into later centuries was due to reverence for Dionysus or sheer collector's curiosity. Was it a symbol of continuity, or just an amusing antique that people kept around like a quirky family heirloom? You follow the cup further still. In the 19th century, tucked in quiet museum cabinets, kylix became educational tools, their painted figures studied under gaslight by bespectacled scholars. Dionysus reclining at the bottom of a cup was no longer a drinking companion, but a dusty artifact, a frozen god waiting behind glass. And then, in the modern day, you catch whispers of the kylix in student dorms and living rooms. Drinking games, messy laughter, red solo cups standing in for ancient pottery. But the spirit is the same. People invent clumsy vessels, balance coins on bottles, or force each other to sip from impractical containers, all for the joy of watching dignity collapse into laughter. Dionysus would fit right in at a frat party, raising his awkward cup with a grin. The echoes stretch across time. From the smoky symposium to the shadowed grove, from Roman banquets to dusty museum shelves, and even into your own kitchen cupboard where that one impractical mug always drips down the side. Dionysus has been there, quietly preferring the awkward cup. You tilt it one last time, watching the liquid tremble, and you realize it was never about the vessel itself. It was about what the vessel caused. Laughter, humility, spilled offerings, unexpected communion. The awkward cup is less an object and more a mirror, reminding you that life rarely pours neatly. And as the centuries fade around you, leaving only the soft hush of your own breathing, the kylix slips gently from your hands. It doesn't shatter. It simply rests on the ground, as though waiting for someone else to pick it up and fumble their way into Dionysus' lesson. The story quiets now, soft as the last ripple in a cup. You're no longer in a hall of philosophers or a grove of dancers. You're simply here, in your own space, listening to the hum of your room and the slow rhythm of your breath. The awkward cup, with all its spills and laughter, fades gently into memory, like a dream you half remember on waking. Your body feels heavier now, as though you've reclined on one of those ancient couches yourself, the cushions giving way beneath you. The clatter of symposium games, the voices of poets, the laughter of Dionysus, they all drift further and further away. What remains is only a soft reminder. Perfection isn't necessary, control isn't always possible, and even the most uneven vessels can carry joy. You let your eyes soften, imagining the faint glow of torchlight, or perhaps the moon reflecting on wine. The sounds blur, the chatter, the songs, the splash of liquid, and melt into the steady beat of your own heartbeat. Every breath out is like a gentle offering, every breath in like a sip of something calming. You notice how quiet the world becomes when you allow it. The awkward cup rests, the god fades, and the night wraps itself softly around you. Nothing more is demanded now. No need to balance, no need to hold tightly. You can simply let go. So let the story fade, let the images dissolve, and allow your mind to wander, drifting calmly into the stillness that waits beyond words. The journey is complete, and Dionysus himself would smile to see you surrender so peacefully.